between good governance and growth, between gender equality and growth. As I said, it's not fashionable to say these things, but at the end of the day, the data has to be there. But that doesn't mean they are not important social or political goals to pursue.
Thank you. I think the question was raised about, in this 21st century, can we have another Mao, which Xi Jinping is trying to become? Well, we have had many surprises in this century, and Mr. Trump is also a surprise. So, frankly, this is the new normal in a sense. But I think we have to look at longer term trends. I think what we have to recognize is that there is very little doubt that China has become one of the preeminent powers. If you're looking at the indices of great power status, then certainly in terms of its economic strength, in terms of its military and security strength, it has certainly come a very long way. Yes, in terms of having an idea which grabs, international imagination in a sense, perhaps it has not quite got there, but it is making an effort in that direction. It is certainly with the 19th Party Congress, it is certainly aspiring to put forward a new model of development, which you may call soft authoritarianism linked with market liberalism. Presenting this as an alternative to what it says is a capitalist model, which, thanks to 2007-2008 crisis, has failed. Which may be a premature assessment I've done, but at least China is certainly moving in that direction. And historically, that kind of an ideological, sort of or attempt to have that kind of dominance has come only after the other indices of hard power are in place. We still have to wait for some time before that happens. But there is no doubt that China is certainly moving in that direction. With respect to what are the ways in which India and China can work together, and in that context, question of what lesson do we learn from Doklam? It is true that if India and China were able to really put in place a relationship which can leverage the very obvious economic complementarities which are there between the two, naturally it would benefit both sides. But this is where I think lack of trust, the fact that there are certain negative legacies of history, these do come in the way. That is the reality. So Doklam, in a sense, was, to my mind, in a sense, a risky thing, but also a good message, because it did show to both leaders in both countries how easily, in fact, the interests of both countries could be very, very severely damaged if these kind of potential conflicts are not managed properly. The good news has been that over the last 15 years or so, thanks to the very strong commitment of leaders on both sides to engage with each other frequently, to try and keep the relationship on an even keel, what could have been clashes have been essentially avoided. So I take that as a good sign. But whether moving forward, this kind of a dynamic tension, as it were, between economic interests and political tension, whether that can be managed properly, I frankly do not know how that will come about. Now, with respect to two issues, one is, in this context of economic complementarities, why are we not signing on to OBOR. I'm glad that Rajat said that this is a half-baked idea. Well, it's not half-baked from the Chinese side. I think they have a very good idea of what they want OBOR to achieve. And there are multiple objectives. One is, of course, to be able to find outlet for immense spare capacity that is there in China, especially with respect to the major industries like steel, energy infrastructure, other infrastructure areas. So they are looking at this not only as something which can deal with what is becoming a major domestic economic issue, but also a platform which can enable them to, in a sense, create a hard wiring of Asia and beyond, where the centrality of China is in some way ensured. Whether it will succeed or not remains to be seen. But I think an Indian caution in this regard and an insistence that we can't sign on to an idea without knowing what really it means in practical terms. If there are projects which are viable, where financing packages are available, I don't think that India would have a problem, sort of participating in that. But to be told, first you sign on to this idea, then we will get down to the details, I don't think that is a reasonable position to take. And the argument has been given that we are somehow or the other denying India many benefits that could come by signing on. I don't really think so. Pension has been made of the Indian market. A Xiaomi or a Alibaba or a Huawei will come to India if they perceive that there are profitable opportunities here. OBOR or no OBOR. If they miss out on this because India has not signed on to OBOR, the loss is Chinese, not I think Indian. So I think we should not get into this frame which the Chinese are selling, that you don't sign on to OBOR, you're missing out on big opportunities. I do not accept that. Then finally, with regard to the situation in our own region, mention has been made. I think Rajat mentioned the Quad, which has become very, very salient at the moment. The kind of relationship, security relationship amongst Japan, Korea, by the way, is not in that. Where India will go for partnerships in all domains where it suits India's interests. If it is deemed to be in India's interest, partnerships are good for India. We are not engaged in an alliance. And the example is what, for example, the Chinese are doing today with Russia. The Chinese-Russian relationship is very strong on the economic side, energy partnership, but it is also very strong on the defense side. It's one of the most rapidly expanding defense relationships that we have seen in recent time. So my question to my interlocutor was, is this alliance, is this directed against third countries? And the answer was no. This is only cooperation between China and Russia. It is not directed against third countries. It's a partnership. We are not in an alliance with Russia. So I said, well, by the same metric, you should not complain about what India is doing with the US. It is not directed against third countries. So we cannot have a veto over relationships that the Chinese want. Equally, we will not accept any veto from China on relationships that India has. And that, in fact, enables us to manage the Chinese challenge much more effectively than would otherwise be the case. That's my experience.
Thank you, Shyam. So, in about 5 to 10 minutes that we have left, what I'm going to do is, Rajat has asked for a few more minutes just to come back on a few things that he wants to respond to, and then we'll see how we end the evening. But Rajat first.
Just take a couple of minutes. I've forgotten to cover what Ashok had asked. I think it was a very important point. That is the Chinese equilibrium sustainable? And I think Shyam had already responded to it. I think that's now an open question. And there's a very interesting article by Ian Bremmer, the most recent Economist, in which basically he's saying that the model of development using the Chinese principles of soft power, etc., may not be something that we should discard too readily. But in that context, a question that we do cover in the lectures and probably will come up as well, but I might as well put it on the table, is democracy a necessary condition for development? And some interesting work done by David Dollar and others shows that just like the Maslow's need hierarchy model, democracy and development have a similar model. That is, in the earlier stages of development, a certain dose of authoritarianism is actually desirable. But as sort of people grow and as your economic power grows, and it goes back to a point I think Anupam was also alluding to, people want something more than just having the third television or the third car in the garage. And that something is freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. And that is what democracy gives, with all its chaos and all its problems. And only this morning, totally coincidentally, flipping through various things which comes on my phone, there was a survey done in China in preparation for President Trump's visit, when people were asked to define America, Chinese were asked to define America in one word. And you know the word that came most from the Chinese was freedom.
What?
Freedom. So the word the Chinese said to the reporters was, when they think of America, they think of freedom, the underlying tone being, that is what we aspire to. So my feeling is that, Ashok, the Chinese equilibrium is not sustainable if they go it this way. There will have to be opening up, there will have to be aspirations met. In what form that will happen? Will it be a glasnost like in Soviet Union with the consequences, or something else? I don't know. But I think it's not going to be the Chinese model the way we see it.
Thank you, Rajat. So actually, I think we will bring this to a close. This discussion has really expanded the entire notion of the book, and of course has brought on reflections that really challenge both the book, but also obviously are a pointer to the direction which this century is likely to go. I think it's been a great discussion. I would have loved to have posed questions about demography and technology, the things that Sanjay referred to, the fact that Shyam very early on said we are talking about the Chinese century and not really just the Asian century. In some ways, the question of what happens with the vacuum that the US is now creating in world affairs, and potentially whether India reaches its potential or not, and how rapidly. Those are all very big questions that are also going to play a huge part in how this century is going to shape up. So in 2017, just as in 1917, Sanjay, we kind of are bemused, unafraid of making projections, but at the same time quite unsure of whether this will be indeed the Asian century or the Chinese century or perhaps even the Indian century. So with that, let me thank my distinguished panelists. Let me thank Rajat for really a tremendous effort, both in preparing these lectures, delivering them, and of course, all the hard work that goes into converting lectures into a fantastic book, which I fully agree with Sanjay, is a must-reading. Even if you don't agree with it, it provokes you to think about what might happen for the next couple of generations in this part of the world. So with that, let me thank all of you for coming. It's a late evening, and the smog, of course, was a huge deterrent, but despite that, you come, and thank you all for a lovely evening, and let's give a big round of applause. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and good night.